What I have here is a end cut cutting board that I've been working on for a little while. The exterior is black walnut and the interior is rock maple. The cutting board itself measures about 26 inches by 17 inches by about 1.5 inches. So it's pretty thick, it's pretty stout, it's very heavy, and it's going to serve my needs for a long time to come. It's really, really big. Now the video I'm doing here is about the surface. I've sanded it pretty smooth as I care to have it. I'm going to be using a knife on this all the time, so it doesn't need to be any smoother than I have taken it here, which is about, I've taken it at 600 grit. A lot of people will only go up to 220, but I like a really smooth surface, at least to start with. The knife cuts are going to show right away, but that's okay. That's kind of part of what a cutting board's all about, really. So this hasn't been treated with anything aside from a little bit of water. I raised the grain on it twice so that I could knock the grain back down. That's often referred to as de-whiskering. Now what you do is you just wet it down after you've sanded it, and it causes little bits of the grain to lift up, and the whole surface gets rough and kind of gross to touch. It's a little bit like a matte finish, and it's little bumpy bits all over the place. So then what you do is you let it dry, you sand that off, and then some people call it good with one shot on that. I like to do about 2 or 3 de-whiskering passes on it, where I'll get it wet, let it dry, sand it, and then it's good to go. That way when you wipe it down, or if you have to like rinse it off or something like that, it's not gonna really ruin the finish of it very much by doing that, or if you just get some wet food on it. Now the point is what to treat it with. There are different schools of thought on this. One thing you don't want to use is you don't want to use olive oil or canola oil or any of the oils that can go rancid and that are considered like a wet oil. Something that is going to last a long time and it doesn't ever go rancid, get mineral oil. You can find mineral oil in a lot of your like pharmacy sections of big box stores, or in just pharmacy stores in general. They'll always carry this in the laxative section. You can buy this stuff in like a woodworking shop too, or your like hardware store kind of place, but it's going to cost like 2 or 3 times as much for the exact same stuff. There's zero difference between this and the stuff that you get from the hardware store. This is a non-drying oil, meaning it will never really dry, but it also doesn't go rancid, which is really, really important, because if the oils go rancid in your board, then it's gonna be kind of gross. So you don't want that. Some people also like to use drying oils, such as walnut oil, for an example, is a drying oil, and that oil doesn't really go rancid because it dries up eventually. But for cutting boards, I stick to mineral oil. I find it's the best. Plus, the act of putting the mineral oil in the board for the first time, when it goes from being just plain wood to having the oil in it, I find it really satisfying. I like the color change that you get from it, because it will deepen the colors, it'll bring out some of the colors, especially the black walnut, but this section here is going to change color quite a bit. So now what I usually do is I take it and I just make 2 little holes so that the oil can come out and some air can go back in. I find I don't even need to take the whole top off. It's just really unnecessary. So here we go. I'm gonna start boiling. You can already see some of the color changing where the oil's on there. Now this board is gonna take a lot of oil because it's a brand new board, and it's gonna soak this stuff up. So there's a nice pass on there, plenty of oil. Paper towel, fold it up, and I'm just gonna spread this oil around. And I want this to like soak into the wood, get really deep into the wood. Don't worry about these lines and stuff, they'll disappear as the oil soaks in. I've got plastic underneath to catch any drips, so I'm doing this on my router table. Oh yeah. Love seeing that color pop like that. This may seem like a lot of oil, but believe me, it will soak in. A whole lot of it will. And any excess will just be wiped off in the end anyway. See how much more golden that looks? Now, I've chosen rock maple for the center because it has a really high hardness factor. It's about 1400 and I think 1440 on the Jenka hardness scale. And the black walnut edge, it's not really meant for cutting, but people do make cutting boards out of black walnut. But that one is only, I believe, around 850, I think, 900, somewhere around there. So it's not nearly as hard as the rock maple. Now, see, the thing about that is you want to get a hardwood for a cutting board, but you don't want it to be too hard. If the wood is too hard, it'll dull your knife. Also, if the wood has silica in it, it will dull your knife. But if it's just the right hardness, it will resist being cut by the knife, but also it won't dull out the knife nearly as quickly. So rock maple is pretty much one of the best possible choices that you can make. It's an industry standard. Almost everybody makes boards out of rock maple, or sometimes called hard maple. It's also called sugar maple. There are different names for it, but it's all the same stuff. You're still dealing with maple. All right, so there's one side of the board, and as you can see, well, you may not be able to see, the oil is soaking in. It's like soaking in pretty quickly. But I want to get to the other side of the board. That'd be another deep color change. So just flip this over. Put a little bit more oil on here. And get to spreading it. And there's a lot left in this paper towel already, so I don't necessarily need to put too much on here. But like I said, the board will absorb quite a bit. Oh, I love that color change. Really makes a huge difference. Now it's important, I mentioned earlier the de-whiskering process, the raising the grain and all that. If you don't do that and then you oil your board, it won't raise the grain. Oil doesn't really raise the grain when you do that. It has to be water. And if you fail to do the de-whiskering part, and then you oil it, and then you wash it, or wash it in the sense of rinsing it off. You don't ever want to use soap on one of these. But you clean it, and then it raises the grain. You're going to really have a really tough time getting that knocked back down, because this oil will gum up your sandpaper really bad. Now my intention is to use the other side of the board as the primary side. This would be effectively my bottom side of the board, although both sides have been sanded smooth and both sides could absolutely be used. My intention is to use the other side. On this side, though, oil has pretty much soaked in. Now I'm going to repeat this process throughout the course of the day. I'm going to put oil in this over and over again, because I want it to soak as deep into the wood as I can get it. And it will just kind of soak in all the way through. I'm going to fix that caul. These are cauls that I have laid down here. Kind of stuck due to the oil. So give a little bit more on this side. The oil, as it soaks in, eventually will stop soaking in, because the wood will have soaked up as much of it as it can. And then the oil begins to pool up. At that point, you're going to want to wipe off any excess that might be on the board. And the ultimate goal here is to provide protection so that water and bacteria don't get into the board as much. Although this wood does have its own natural antibacterial qualities to it. It will fight off bacteria. Maple is known for doing that. And but if you get that oil in there, then the water can't get in. And it's important to re-oil your board from time to time, just to keep it maintained. And that's pretty much it. The rest of this process is the same thing over and over again until the board stops soaking up oil. And then you'll be able to use it. And that's it. Thanks for watching.